The day I became the hero of Oak Ridge Lane was the same day I became public enemy number one to the Montgomery family. $4,500. That's what their precious BMW cost to repair after their teenage son learned a valuable lesson about respecting neighborhood safety. What they didn't know was that I had 3 children under 10, endless sleepless nights from engine revving, and exactly 0 regrets about what I did. If you're watching this video while peeking through your blinds at the teenager who treats your residential street like a Formula One track, drop a comment right now telling me your highest recorded speed. I guarantee this story will keep you glued to your screen. My name is Marcus Reeves, and until 5 months ago, I was living what most would consider a peaceful suburban existence. I'd spent 12 years building a career in construction management, eventually starting my own residential consulting business that allowed me to work from home and be present for my young family. My wife Elaine and I had carefully chosen this neighborhood for its good schools, wide streets, and most importantly, its reputation as a safe place to raise children. But life has a way of introducing chaos just when you think you've found your perfect corner of the world. The Montgomery family moved in across the street and 4 houses down last October. At first, everything seemed fine. Standard new neighbor interactions, polite waves, and the usual adjustment period. David Montgomery was some kind of investment banker who commuted to the city. His wife Carla seemed pleasant enough, if a bit standoffish at neighborhood gatherings. They had 1 child, 17-year-old Justin, who'd gotten his driver's license just before they moved in, and that's where our problems began. Justin's 16th birthday present had been a 2023 BMW 3 Series, midnight blue, custom wheels, and as I would later discover, a modified exhaust system specifically designed to announce his presence with maximum disruption. What kind of parents buy their newly licensed teenager a performance vehicle? The kind who apparently believed rules didn't apply to their family. The first time I noticed Justin's driving, I was in my front yard planting spring bulbs with my 7-year-old daughter Emma. A car came roaring down our 25-mile-per-hour street at what had to be at least 50, the engine screaming as it passed. The wind it generated actually knocked Emma off balance, sending her tumbling into our mulch bed. "What was that, Daddy?" she asked, wide-eyed as she brushed dirt from her hands. "That," I replied, helping her up, was someone who apparently doesn't care about anyone but himself. I made a mental note to mention it to the parents if it happened again, assuming it was just teenage exuberance. I was wrong. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was Justin Montgomery's standard driving procedure. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern became clear. Justin would leave for school around 7:30 a.m., engine revving dramatically as he accelerated down our street. He'd return sometime mid-afternoon, again treating our residential road like his personal racetrack. But the real show came on weekend nights, when he'd return well after midnight, apparently believing that everyone should be awoken to appreciate his vehicular performance. After a particularly disruptive Saturday night arrival at 1:47 a.m. that woke not only me but also my 3-year-old twins, I decided it was time for a friendly neighbor-to-neighbor chat. Sunday afternoon, I walked down to the Montgomery's house and rang the doorbell. David Montgomery answered, dressed in what appeared to be designer golf attire, looking mildly annoyed at the interruption. "Hi there," I began, extending my hand. "I'm Marcus Reeves from down the street. We haven't formally met yet." He shook my hand with the enthusiasm of someone touching wet laundry. "David Montgomery, what can I do for you?" I kept my tone friendly but direct. I wanted to talk about Justin's driving. He's been coming down our street at extremely high speeds, and with 3 young kids, I'm concerned about safety. Last night, around 1:45, he woke up half the neighborhood. David's expression shifted from mild annoyance to something closer to contempt. "Justin is an excellent driver. He took advanced courses when he got his license." "I'm sure he's skilled," I replied, "but the issue is speed. Our street is posted at 25 miles per hour, and he's definitely—" "Do you have a radar gun?" David interrupted, folding his arms. "Have you actually clocked his speed, or are you just another neighbor with nothing better to do than complain?" I was taken aback by his immediate defensiveness. "No, I don't have a radar gun, but when a car passes with enough force to knock over my 7-year-old, children fall all the time, he dismissed with a wave of his hand. That hardly sounds like my son's fault. But I'll mention it to him. His tone made it abundantly clear that this conversation was over. As I walked back home, I realized two things. David Montgomery had no intention of addressing his son's dangerous driving, and any future attempts at neighborly diplomacy would likely be equally futile. That night, predictably, Justin's midnight racing continued, the modified exhaust seemingly even louder than before. It felt deliberate, as if my complaint had only encouraged more disruptive behavior. The next day, I spoke with other neighbors and discovered I wasn't alone in my concerns. The Patels next door had a similar conversation with David Montgomery, with equally dismissive results. Elderly, Mrs. Winters across the street was afraid to get her mail when Justin might be coming home from school. Several families had already filed complaints with the local police. They sent a patrol car once, explained Tom Chen from 2 doors down, but unless they catch him in the act with an actual speed measurement, there's not much they can do, and they don't have the resources to stake out our street waiting for a teenage speed demon. I decided to try going directly to the source. The following afternoon, I spotted Justin washing his precious BMW in the Montgomery's driveway. He was tall and lanky, with the perpetually bored expression that some teenagers seem to perfect. Approaching with what I hoped was a casual, non-confrontational demeanor, I introduced myself. "Hey, Justin, I'm Marcus from down the street. That's a really nice car." He barely glanced up from his meticulous polishing. "Thanks. I actually wanted to talk to you about driving through the neighborhood. We've got a lot of young kids around, and the speed limit is pretty low for safety reasons." Justin finally looked at me, his expression a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Are you the guy who talked to my dad? He said some neighbor was complaining about nothing." "It's not nothing," I explained patiently. "It's about safety. My daughter was knocked over by the wind from your car going past." He rolled his eyes dramatically. "Dude, no way my car could do that unless your daughter weighs like 20 pounds. Maybe teach her to stand properly." He turned his attention back to his vehicle. "My dad says I'm a great driver. I've never even gotten a ticket." "That's because you haven't been caught," I pointed out. "Look, I'm not trying to be the neighborhood bad guy here. I just want everyone to be safe." "Whatever, man," Justin replied, clearly done with the conversation. "I've got places to be, and I'm not going to crawl down the street at like 2 miles an hour because someone's kid can't stay upright." As I walked away, I heard the unmistakable sound of Justin mimicking my voice to someone on his phone, followed by laughter. That evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat down with Elaine in our kitchen. "I don't know what else to do," I admitted, frustrated. "The father thinks his son can do no wrong. The kid is a complete entitled brat, and the police don't have the resources to monitor our street 24/7. Elaine sipped her tea thoughtfully. "What about a neighborhood petition? Or bringing it up at the next HOA meeting?" "The Montgomerys don't seem like the type to care about neighborhood opinions," I replied. "And our HOA has limitations on what they can enforce. They can cite people for lawn violations, but can't really do anything about traffic issues on public streets." "Speed bumps?" Elaine suggested. "The city puts those in residential areas sometimes, right?" That idea caught my attention. "Speed bumps would definitely solve the problem. I'll call the city tomorrow." What followed was 3 weeks of bureaucratic runaround that led nowhere. The city required traffic studies, multiple public hearings, and approval from at least 75% of residents on the street. Even if approved, installation would take 8 to 12 months due to budget constraints and scheduling. Meanwhile, Justin's racing continued unabated. In fact, it seemed to be getting worse. Twice I witnessed him deliberately swerve toward children's toys left near the curb, sending them flying while he laughed with his passengers. One evening, he nearly hit Mrs. Winter's cat, missing it by inches while blasting music so loud it rattled windows. The breaking point came on a Thursday afternoon. I was working from home when I heard the familiar roar of Justin's BMW, followed immediately by squealing tires and children screaming. I ran outside to find a group of elementary schoolers who'd been playing basketball in the Chen's driveway huddled at the side of the road, several of them crying. Their basketball had rolled into the street, and Justin had deliberately swerved toward it, popping the ball and terrifying the kids. Tom Chen was already outside, comforting the children while glaring in the direction Justin had disappeared. "That's it," Tom said when he saw me. "Someone's going to get killed." "These are children." I nodded grimly. "The city's not going to help us in time. We need to take matters into our own hands." That night, several neighbors gathered in my living room: the Chens, the Patels, Mrs. Winters, and the Rodriguezes, whose youngest had been among the frightened basketball players. We discussed options ranging from neighborhood watch schedules to pooling money for a private security patrol. "What we really need are those speed bumps," Mrs. Rodriguez sighed. "But if the city won't install them," a thought sparked in my mind. "What if we didn't wait for the city?" Everyone looked at me curiously. "I'm in construction management," I continued. "I know suppliers and contractors. What if we installed our own speed control solution?" "Is that legal?" Mrs. Winters asked, concern evident in her voice. "Not exactly," I admitted. "Technically, we can't modify a public street without permits. But," I paused, considering our options, "what about a removable solution? Something we could place temporarily, document the effectiveness, and use that to pressure the city." The idea gained momentum as we discussed logistics. My company had just finished a project for a commercial property that included removable speed bumps in their parking lot, heavy-duty rubber constructions that could be bolted down or removed as needed. "I could probably get a few of those," I mused. "They're not cheap, but if we all chip in..." Everyone immediately agreed to contribute. By the end of the evening, we had collected nearly $1,200 and formulated a plan. The following Monday, I called my supplier contact, explaining that I needed 2 commercial-grade rubber speed bumps for a residential demonstration project. They arrived Thursday, each 4 feet long, 6 inches high, and built to withstand vehicles up to 20,000 pounds. They were serious deterrents, designed to force drivers to slow to about 5 miles per hour or risk significant vehicle damage. Friday night, after most of the neighborhood was asleep, Tom, Mr. Rodriguez, and I met to install our solution. We positioned one speed bump about 50 yards from the entrance to our street, far enough that drivers would already be accelerating, but early enough to protect most houses. The second went near the middle of the block, where Justin typically hit his highest speeds. We secured them with heavy-duty construction adhesive rather than bolts to avoid drilling into the public road. This made them technically temporary structures, which we felt might provide some legal defense if needed. As a final touch, we added reflective tape and bright yellow paint to make them visible to careful drivers. "Now we wait," Tom said as we admired our handiwork. The bumps were substantial, but not unreasonable for anyone driving the actual speed limit. The next morning, Saturday, we didn't have to wait long. Around 11 a.m., I was in my front yard playing with the twins when I heard the distinctive sound of Justin's BMW approaching the neighborhood entrance. The engine revved aggressively as usual, and I braced myself for what was about to happen. The first speed bump caught him completely by surprise. I heard a horrible scraping sound, followed by cursing loud enough to carry down the street. But Justin, ever the slow learner, apparently decided this was a fluke and accelerated again, right into our second speed bump. This impact was much worse. There was a sickening crunch of metal, a spray of fluid that I later learned was oil from his damaged pan, and the unmistakable sound of an expensive car being significantly damaged. Justin's BMW limped to a stop in front of the Patel's house, smoke now billowing from under the hood. He got out, his face a mask of shock and rage as he surveyed the damage. The car's front bumper was partially torn off, hanging at an odd angle. A trail of fluid marked his path from the second speed bump. "What the hell is this?" he shouted at no one in particular, kicking his front tire in frustration. He hadn't noticed me watching from my yard. Several neighbors had come out at the commotion. Mrs. Winters stood on her porch with a poorly concealed smile. Tom Chen walked over to examine the speed bump with exaggerated curiosity. "Looks like someone installed some speed control measures," Tom observed innocently. They're painted bright yellow, though. Pretty visible if you're driving carefully. Justin was apoplectic. Do you know how much this car costs? My father is going to sue whoever did this. Might be tough to sue someone for making you follow the speed limit, Mr. Rodriguez commented, joining the growing audience. Especially with all the documented complaints about dangerous driving on this street. Justin pulled out his phone and frantically called his father. I couldn't hear the entire conversation, but phrases like, "someone sabotaged the road," and "totally destroyed my car" featured prominently. Within 15 minutes, a sleek black Range Rover came screeching around the corner, only to abruptly slow down when the driver, presumably David Montgomery, spotted the first speed bump. He navigated over it cautiously before parking behind his son's disabled BMW. David Montgomery emerged looking like a thundercloud. "Who is responsible for this?" he demanded, gesturing at the speed bump and then at his son's damaged vehicle. I decided it was time to step forward. "Good morning, David. Looks like Justin had an accident." His eyes narrowed as he recognized me. "This was no accident. This is deliberate vandalism of public property and destruction of private property. I've already called the police." "That's probably a good idea," I agreed calmly. "They can take statements from all the neighbors about the dangerous driving that's been happening on this street. I'm sure they'd be interested in the incident report from Thursday when your son terrorized a group of children playing basketball." David's face flushed. "You have no proof my son did anything wrong, but I have clear evidence of property damage caused by these illegal installations." "You're right that the speed bumps aren't city approved," I acknowledged, "but proving who installed them might be difficult. Proving that your son regularly drives at dangerous speeds won't be hard at all. We have multiple video recordings, documented complaints to police, and at least 15 witnesses." David stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You think you're clever, don't you? Do you have any idea who I am in this community? I'm on the board of directors for the Regional Planning Commission. One phone call from me would reveal that you used your position to block legitimate safety measures requested by residents," I interrupted. "That would be interesting for the local news, I think." Our standoff was interrupted by the arrival of a police cruiser. Officer Martinez was familiar to many of us. He'd responded to previous complaints about Justin's driving. David immediately approached him. "Officer, I want to file charges for vandalism and destruction of property. These illegal speed bumps damaged my son's vehicle." Officer Martinez surveyed the scene with practiced neutrality, then turned to Justin. "This your car, son?" Justin nodded sullenly. "How fast would you say you were driving when you hit the speed bump?" "I don't know," Justin muttered. "Normal speed. It came out of nowhere." "The bright yellow speed bump came out of nowhere," the officer repeated, making a note. "And you hit it with enough force to cause this much damage to a vehicle with high-end suspension." He walked over to examine the speed bumps, then returned to address the growing crowd of neighbors. "These structures aren't city approved and technically shouldn't be here," he acknowledged. "However, given the multiple documented complaints about dangerous driving on this street, including reports I've personally responded to, this seems like a community safety initiative." David Montgomery was indignant. "So you're saying it's acceptable for private citizens to modify public roads? That vigilante justice is allowed in this town?" Officer Martinez shrugged. "I'm saying that if someone were to press charges, we'd need to investigate all aspects of this situation, including reviewing traffic camera footage from the main intersection that might show the BMW's speed entering the neighborhood, and collecting statements from all these witnesses about patterns of dangerous driving." He gestured to the assembled neighbors. "We'd also need to discuss why multiple formal requests for city speed bumps were delayed or denied despite documented safety concerns," he added pointedly. David Montgomery's face went through several interesting color changes as he processed the implications. Justin looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Now," Officer Martinez continued, "I could write this up as an accident report, noting that the driver struck a road obstacle while potentially exceeding the posted speed limit. That would be the simplest solution for everyone." After a long moment, David nodded stiffly. "Fine, an accident report. As for these The officer indicated the speed bumps. They should probably be removed within the next 48 hours. And I'll personally make sure the city fast-tracks the official speed bump request that I believe Mr. Reeves submitted 3 weeks ago. He gave me a knowing look. I had indeed submitted the request, along with signatures from nearly every household on the street. David called a tow truck for Justin's BMW, refusing to make eye contact with any of the neighbors as they waited. Justin sat on the curb, alternating between texting furiously and glaring at me with undisguised hatred. Once they had departed, Officer Martinez approached me privately. "Nice speed bumps," he commented with the barest hint of a smile. "Commercial grade?" "I have no idea what you're talking about, officer," I replied innocently. But hypothetically, if someone wanted to ensure neighborhood safety while waiting for city bureaucracy, they might invest in quality materials. He nodded. "Hypothetically, I'd say that was a wise investment, but they should definitely be removed soon. I'd hate to have to come back in an official capacity." "Understood," I assured him. "I imagine they'll disappear as mysteriously as they appeared." Later that evening, as promised, Tom, Mr. Rodriguez, and I removed the speed bumps. Our point had been made. The aftermath was both swift and satisfying. The following Monday, I received a call from the city's traffic department informing me that our speed bump request had been approved as an emergency safety measure. Installation would begin within 2 weeks. Justin's BMW disappeared for nearly a month, presumably undergoing extensive repairs. When it finally returned, something miraculous had happened. He drove at exactly the speed limit through our neighborhood. No racing, no engine revving, no terrifying young children. David Montgomery still didn't speak to me or acknowledge my existence when our paths crossed. Carla Montgomery, however, surprisingly stopped me one day while I was checking my mail. "I wanted to say thank you," she said quietly, glancing around as if worried about being overheard. David would never admit it, but Justin needed a wake-up call. That car was a mistake. I said so from the beginning. "We all just want a safe neighborhood," I replied, surprised by her candor. She nodded. The repair bill was $4,500. David made Justin pay half from his own savings. First time that boy has had a consequence in years. She gave a small, satisfied smile before walking away. The official city speed bumps were installed exactly where our temporary ones had been. They were lower and less dramatic than our commercial-grade versions, but they served their purpose effectively. Our street became one of the safest in the development, and neighborhood children returned to playing freely. 6 months later, the Montgomerys put their house on the market. The rumor was that David had been passed over for a promotion, possibly related to some uncomfortable questions about his handling of neighborhood safety concerns in his role on the Planning Commission. They moved to a gated community across town where, presumably, Justin could drive as recklessly as he wanted on private roads. The family that purchased their house had 2 elementary school children and a minivan with "Drive Like Your Kids Live Here" bumper stickers. They fit right in. Looking back, I don't regret what we did, even though it skirted the edges of legality. Sometimes community safety requires decisive action, especially when official channels fail. The system isn't always designed to protect the people who need protection most. And if you're watching this while dealing with your own neighborhood speed demon, remember, sometimes the most effective solutions aren't found in City Hall, but in collective action by people who've simply had enough. Just make sure your speed bumps are really, really visible. For legal reasons, of course. Oh, and if you're wondering what happened to those temporary speed bumps we removed, they found a new home in front of a playground 2 neighborhoods over. But that's a story for another video.